Just weeks before Labor Day, Donald Trump unilaterally stripped hundreds of thousands of federal government workers of their union contracts. That was Donald Trump's way of saying, Happy Labor Day. And here to discuss that development with us today is the president of the American Federation of Government Employees, Everett Kelley. President Kelley, thank you for joining us.
The pleasure's mine. Thank you for having me.
And about that development, this just happened, I believe, last week. The White House announcing after a federal appeals court paused your victory in litigation that had blocked the Trump administration's executive order that he would strip hundreds of thousands of federal government workers of their union contracts. What's your reaction to that development?
Well, of course, I'm appalled by that. Okay, to say the least. But at the same time, it still continues to give us the opportunity to fight and litigate these issues. But the fact that this administration is gutting contracts, is un-American. I've been involved in this labor movement since 1981, and I've never seen anyone this aggressively attacking federal employees and their union. So it's appalling to me.
Let's talk about the executive order that started your litigation. Your union represents 800,000 plus government employees. And this executive order purports to curtail their collective bargaining rights. Tell us about this executive order and just how much, percentage-wise, of the federal workforce is affected.
Well, there's about, I think, a little better than 200,000 in the workforce. Million, 2-point-something million in the workforce. And what this administration did is eliminated about half of those, about 1 million people, was taken out of the bargaining unit, stripped of their rights, that was guaranteed to them under the Constitution.
And so far, I believe The Guardian reported more than 400,000 employees have been stripped of their union rights. Does that statistic sound correct?
I think it would be more than that, because even just in the VA alone, we represent about 320,000 in the VA alone. And so I think that it will be better than 400,000 when you start looking at all of the agencies that have been stripped of their rights under the contract.
So tell folks what that means on an agency by agency level. You can throw out these numbers, hundreds of thousands of workers. What does that mean for veterans who are going to the VA? What does this mean for the way that these agencies function?
Well, and a lot of people have a misunderstandings about unions and why unions exist. Okay, union exists first and foremost to make sure that employees are treated with fairness and dignity on the job, to make sure that there is some accountability on the job, that no one can just run rogue, in the federal agency. It protects employees from discrimination. It protects employees from being bullied and harassed and those types of things. So when the union is not there, also it makes sure that employees can work in safe working conditions. When the union is not there, then it's open season on those employees. And how does that affect a veteran? Well, I'm a veteran myself, okay? And when I go to the VA, I want to know that, a nurse that's working on me, their mind is clear to make sure that they can focus on my needs as a veteran. But when you don't have union protection, to protect you from harassment, to protect you from bullying, you don't know what you're walking into when you walk into that office, right? Because it may be that this employee had just been, harassed by their supervisor, and they have that on their mind versus, taking care of that veteran like they should. So, the union kind of helps, make sure that type of thing doesn't happen in the workplace.
Mm. I mentioned earlier you had a legal victory on the trial court level. You won a preliminary injunction that had blocked Trump's executive order. It was paused on appeal, and that feels like a familiar pattern during Trump's second term. How much confidence do you have in the ability, even with this Supreme Court, for these protections to be able to stand amid Trump's power grabs?
Well, I'm hopeful. I'm going to put it like that. I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic because I believe that our justice system was put in place for a reason, and I'm hopeful that there is still enough decency in the justice system that righteousness will prevail.
And if you do win, ultimately, after this round of appeals is over, the pause on your victory is temporary. And if you do win, how much of the damage that has already happened, how much of that can be repaired of the hundreds of thousands who have been stripped of their union rights so far?
It will take some time to repair those damages. I do admit that, but it can be repaired. And you can rest assured that every Kelley will not stop until it's all repaired. Okay? Because what has happened with these federal employees that are very patriotic employees that believe in their mission, is unheard of. And I will not stop. I will not rest until justice is served.
Mm. And as we speak today, we're in the aftermath of Trump's attempt to purport to fire the Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. We've seen across the federal government, I know that's not necessarily a union issue, but there's a theme of Trump trying to assert his power to weaken employee protections, if there are restrictions to his firing, testing those restrictions or just circumventing and violating them. Bigger picture question, how much does the gutting of union rights for federal workers mean for American democracy?
I think that that's a great question because if this administration is successful in gutting the union rights, I think that that is the beginning of gutting, making sure that democracy doesn't exist in this country. Because unions, like I said, are there for accountability to make sure that every agency is held accountable. Every supervisor is held accountable. We negotiate with the agencies and we have processes. But if they can ignore those processes, they will ignore every right that Americans have. And I believe that to be true.
Mm-hmm. Of course, with Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, Trump claimed to be firing her for cause. How much, with what you do with union rights, is having those protections in place that for cause actually means for cause, and that that the government can't swoop in and just purge people and come up with some pretextual excuse?
And that was what I was saying earlier. That's why I think that unions are important, right? To make sure there are checks and balances, to make sure there are accountability. Because when you are protected by union contract, they cannot come in and just say, you're fired. You have to be fired for cause. And I think that's what this Linda is facing right now, right? Is the fact that this guy wants to exercise the power that he think he has, and he's doing whatever it takes to show people that I have the power. But this is what I know. I know that the power is in the people, and I think that the people are going to step up and say enough is enough. I think that they're already stepping up, and I think they're growing tired of this administration believing that they control every aspect of the life of an American. And I think that you're going to see very soon that they are tired of it and they're stepping up.
Mm. Well, thank you for your time very much, President Kelley, and a very happy Labor Day to you. I appreciate you coming on this show and helping break everything down for All Rise News and the Legal AF audience.
No problem. Thank you for having me here.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.